Okay, welcome. Fantastic to another conversation with Damien and Calvin. Good to have you guys on board. It's been a while. I think the last one we had was sort of late November or early December or something, wasn't it? And certainly Christmas and New Year for me has been like a big gap of just not doing just other things. And I haven't put much out. If anything, just a few things on Substack and a few conversations and things like that, and the odd thing posted on the site. But other than that, very little actually. So this is going to sort of get things going quite late in January now, in the way of content. But it's good to have you guys on, and happy 2026, which I think is going to prove to be quite an interesting year. So welcome. We got some things to talk about there, haven't we? Because we've been doing things in the background, and we've been on X. We've been communicating with lawyers on X and politicians about the ongoing debate and conversation about the curtailment of trial by jury. That's been really interesting, and we'll get into that a little bit. Damien's been continuing to do a massive amount of reading and research into 17th century history, and so we'll be bringing that a little bit of that into it maybe as well. We'll see how we go, but it's just a conversation. Welcome, guys. It's good to see you. Fantastic. Obviously, I'd rather see you in the flesh, but
Yeah.
you're miles away, so that doesn't work.
No, it's good to be on. Nice
Yeah,
one for inviting us for another chat.
good,
Yeah, good to be back. Looking
fantastic.
forward to the chat.
So, Damien, what have you? So you've been absolutely piling into the books, and digging up more yet again, which is going to be very awkward, actually. Yet more, which we need to put out, don't we? We need to carry on the series, especially into the next one, and in preparation for that next one that we've been planning of the 17th century history series. We're just getting into the area around the Convention Parliament and the basis, supposedly the basis, for the constitutional changes around the Bill of Rights and all of that kind of stuff, which was going to be the big one. It was always going to be the massive one, wasn't it? So you've been getting into that in much more detail. Any thoughts? Obviously, you don't want to give too much away because you're going to be putting stuff out. But yeah, go on.
Well, what it started off as was just a bit of revision for our next video.
Yeah,
But the more I read, I ended up deciding to write something. And that started as a couple of pages and then grew into about 25 pages because it was that in depth what I was reading, and it was just sending me down other rabbit holes.
yeah.
So yeah, very interesting
The nature
stuff.
of it.
Yeah, so just to touch on it, it's just about the legitimacy of the convention. So that's what I was looking at, and obviously looking at the Constitution, what it was before William and Mary.
Yeah.
So obviously the whole problem with abdication and it being a hereditary monarchy was the big issue.
Yes. Yes,
And
because it hinges on one or two, well, a number of things, but one or two in particular, one or two claims within the Convention Parliament that, yeah, is not really true.
no, it
But the whole
isn't. And
basis.
I'll
Yeah,
just mention a couple of things, just surface is basically the convention was illegitimate because the king didn't obviously issue a writ for it. That's the first
yeah.
issue. It was William of Orange who summoned that parliament and obviously authorized an election. So he was
For himself.
exercising the royal prerogative
Yeah,
before he even became king,
yeah,
which is a problem, a big problem.
yeah.
And then reading more into it, it was just a made up fiction that James had abdicated the government.
He
So the
absolutely hadn't.
throne was
Yeah,
vacant,
yeah,
which is obviously with even the stuff that we've done up to this point is a blatant lie.
yeah.
Uh,
And
so yeah.
I'm still getting messages actually from people who have seen the parts up to this point and saying, "Come on, when you're doing the next one," because it's actually quite riveting. Um, So yeah, no, people want to see how this is going to finish. No question about it. And it won't finish at the next one because there'll be more after that, I guess, won't there? But you know, there's the aftermath and you know what was going on in Scotland and the Irish problem as well, and all of that, and then and of course the banking as well that came out of it as well. So yeah, there's quite a bit more to come, I suspect. But the next piece is going to be a big one, definitely.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, no, that's
Definitely.
good. Calvin, what have you been up to? How, have you been a busy chap?
Uh, Not particularly at the minute, because I finished volunteering on farms last year, just before Christmas. Now I'm in Yorkshire.
Very nice.
Yeah, got sorting out finding a property now, and haven't written much either. Done a couple of videos, really
Yeah,
short ones, but been busy on X trying to communicate with the legal profession, trying to educate constitutional principles into them at pain of death. It's been
yeah,
very frustrating. Interesting though, very interesting.
very
And yes, we I think it's very clear of the point of view that they are firmly standing on, which is essentially authority worship.
right. Yes,
They're,
psychologically, that seems to be the place where they're stuck, isn't it?
yeah, they're passionate. You can see that the entire profession and many MPs are clearly passionate
Yeah,
about preserving trial by jury,
yeah,
but their arguments aren't solid
no,
or not necessarily principled either. In fact, they are, it seems like they're prepared to not acknowledge moral principle in favor of a supreme authority
yes,
or a supposed an assumed supreme authority called parliament, or
yeah.
as we know it to be, parliamentary sovereignty,
Yes,
so called.
it got into it was quite interesting at one point, wasn't it? Because we got into conversation, or I started getting into conversation, I think, and then you guys all joined me. But it was it was a conversation with a I think a KC, who I ultimately put the question to them: do you think that law merely is whatever government tells you it is? And that took us into the interesting place because I don't think they're used to having those kinds of questions thrown at them because you're above what they normally deal with. You know, their job and their role that they're very good at, which is, you know, making a strong legal argument, advocacy in court, understanding the procedures and the processes, and doing a good performance. You know, and all of those are important skills because you damn well need a good defense in court if you get yourself into difficulties. And they're very good at that. There's no question. And us lay people, the last thing that we're going to do is to criticize them in those areas because they're very expert at that. And that's what I tried to get over at one point, wasn't it? I think to Joanna Hardy Suskind, who slightly took issue with me at one point, which we'll get into. But I was trying to say, look, we do respect you for what you do. And
Yes.
I even said this to one of them, I think, at one point. I said the problem is that you guys are a little fuzzy around the areas of the or where does government obtain its authority to govern? Where does it obtain its legitimacy from? And you guys don't really know the answer to these things because you don't exercise your minds on the philosophy of law and jurisprudence. And I
Yeah.
think that you're struggling to answer some of these things, if I'm being honest. And so I'm trying to keep the conversation at a sort of civilized kind of cordial level, to show some respect for what they do. But at the same time, look, come on, you need to think about this stuff because I don't think you're understanding the principles, the constitutional principles that sit at the foundation of this. You're not getting it. And it was self-evident that that was the case because as soon as you bring up the argument that, okay, you're saying on the one hand that trial by jury is a constitutional principle. It's a cornerstone. It's a bedrock. And we've said this before. You say that, but you can't then say that the government can then decide how much of that principle and that foundational idea you have, because you've just contradicted yourself. It's no longer a principle. You can't have it both ways. It either is or it isn't, and that's where I find that they get stuck. That seems to be the problem, I think, at that point. And calling out if you say that it's a constitutional principle and you're suggesting the curtailment of it or the removal of it, wouldn't that be criminal then? Now you're into difficult territory. Okay.
They won't say that.
They won't say it. They don't want to go there. It's
they won't even say that it's unconstitutional. They won't even use that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let
if you're
alone
breaching
criminal.
a constitutional principle and you're suggesting the removal of a constitutional principle, then you must be breaching the Constitution.
So, yeah, doesn't constitutional principles come before legislation?
Right.
Yeah.
So now, exactly. So now you're getting into kind of a difficult area at this point, and they find it very uncomfortable.
If the government are attempting to legislate away constitutional law, where is the authority to do that?
Well, they don't believe there is one, and so that's where you ultimately get to the point.
Yeah.
Where I think this was ultimately where it was going, Calvin, wasn't it? That basically what they were saying was that the Constitution is whatever the government wants it to be at the time. So they can write the Constitution. And the reason why they're not acting criminally is because they think that the Constitution flows from the government, from the legislature.
Yeah.
So there's your problem right there. That's it. It's that belief.
So the psychology behind that essentially is slave think, which is dangerous. And we've said this before, that we actually, I think we mentioned it before, that slave think is actually much more dangerous than master think.
Yes.
Because it's the acceptance of immorality. Essentially what they're accepting is coercion.
Yes.
Which is obviously one of the real 7 deadly sins of the theft of free will decision making. So if they're afraid to stand on principle, then there's a huge element of coercion there.
Yeah. Well, what they're not standing on is the idea that there is an absolute and objective morality. That's what you're saying, I think, isn't it? And that's where the problem lies.
Yes, an objective principle inherent in nature that if we don't abide by that, then there's all sorts of detrimental effects that stem from that, and that's where we're headed if we don't stand on principle, which is why we've been shouting at them digitally.
Absolutely, and that's why they think that the only stop on something outrageous, on something unconscionable legislation, the only stop and check on that is the other side of politics. That's it. So they think that law is made through politics and nothing else, and that's the highest that you can get, is just the political opinion of how things sway from one side to the other. They think the only check on anything unconscionable or disgraceful in any way is just the other side of politics, and just mounting a larger majority politic on the other side to kick back. That's it. That's what they're convinced that's what the check is. And so you're locked into this world where there's nothing higher. There's no admission that, and that's what prompted LW to write that short article, the story, the fictional story of, or is it fictional, of the blue-eyed babies, the fictional land of Tyrann and the blue-eyed babies, which is quite interesting. And if people haven't read it, you should definitely have a look at that. It's on the news section. It's there. But what it is it is a very interesting step through of how a state can deteriorate by twisting and obfuscating these principles of the rule of law, and ultimately how you get to to the really bloody bad place that ultimately you're going to end up. It's really interesting. It's worth reading. But yeah, fascinating.
That was like a more of a detailed rundown on like the whole green trousers legislation thing, wasn't it? I thought.
Yes, exactly.
Just
Yeah.
the logic and reasoning is not there.
Yeah. So they've got no sense of limitation on the state. And so they ultimately admitted, I think at one point, one of them that we were talking to admitted that if a government is way out of line and is proposing something legislative that is just awful, effectively what they were saying is that until you can get that repealed by the next government, that remains legitimate. There you are. That's it.
What I don't understand is how are they accepting the power of the legislature just to do whatever it wants? I don't get that. Even if they're looking at party politics and manifestos and once that 5-year term is up, voting another party in,
Sure.
it's just blatantly obvious that that is a backdoor to tyranny. And if you accept that, then you deserve everything you get.
Yeah, they try to argue that the only checks on that bad place that ultimately you can go to is they would claim that the checks is the political system and conventions, and this is where we've got to get into, not necessarily now, but it's so they claim that parliamentary conventions are the way that's how things become law. And this is the problem. And you're going to get into, as we said, parliamentary sovereignty, as Calvin said earlier, the belief in parliamentary sovereignty. That's become a belief. It's become like a religion, although it's waned since. Yeah, because people are even prepared to admit that and we know that Dicey was just flitting. He was Dicey. He's so aptly named. I mean, the guy was all over the place, right? And so he believed this at one point, and then faltered later in life, and thought, oh, maybe not actually. It's just shocking. So it's like a religion. It's a belief system.
To be honest, Will, even if you go back to like 17th century, that kind of thought was there.
It was.
Of parliament. It was just called parliamentary supremacy then.
Yes, that's exactly what you're going to, that point.
Which obviously has become parliamentary sovereignty.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of time. Because even when you look at the convention, if they're allowed to legislate to authorize what they've previously done, then that's basically saying you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. One of the particularly interesting things, I don't know whether you noticed that, Calvin, we got into this, and that guy James didn't pick up on this, but I asked him this very awkward question because he said at one point, the power of Parliament is demonstrated by the fact that they can repeal or amend any previous law and write any law they like. Right now, that's kind of true in legislation. They can. But what he hasn't understood, and this is the common misconception, is that doesn't make Parliament powerful. What it demonstrates is that the law that you can write in Parliament is weak law. It's weak law because it doesn't bind any future government. So the power of the law that you can write is in how much it can bind future governments, whatever. But legislation can't do that. Legislation can be unpicked by any government at any point. So what that demonstrates is not the power of Parliament, but the weakness of legislation. And they don't see that. And I said to him in a tweet at one point, I said, really powerful law is law that binds future governments. That's what you don't seem to understand. And he didn't follow up on that one. He didn't want to go there because I don't think that the penny had dropped at all. No. But this is the point that they're sort of telling themselves. This is the part of the lie, is that, Parliament must be powerful because we can write any laws we like and we can change any laws that any previous government has written. Yeah, but you're not understanding that means that anything you write has no longevity. There's no power to it.
This is why, throughout time, they've been using their own lawmaking mechanism to write constitutional law.
Trying to, purporting to, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and
And
they don't understand that you can't do that because your law is weak. Can't write constitutional law if any future government can unpick it.
exactly. And as Spooner said, a change of legislators doesn't guarantee a change of legislation anyway. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. There has to be something based purely in principle, which will make it binding because it's therefore in alignment with natural law, which is the real authority that we're all supposed to be aligning with, and that is what the Constitution is. And so with parliamentary sovereignty, they trample on objective morality and principle and elevate subjectivity and moral relativism.
That's exactly
that's what's going on.
Spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, you're allowing the legislature to basically define morality for everybody.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Precisely. Yep. That I need to take that bit out that you just said, both of you guys. That bit needs to be isolated and put up. That's exactly it. You're creating a moral subjectivity through Parliament. It's political opinion. That's ultimately you are deciding for the nation what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable based on political opinion and largely majority, of course. Yeah. Awful. Really basic, massive trap. And we can't see it. So that's what we are. Go on, Calvin, sorry.
And that just emphasizes the importance of the universal conscience of mankind when it's exercised through a jury, because it annihilates all that moral relativism and subjectivity through by applying conscience.
Yeah, conscience is the jurors. That's exactly.
And that's the key. That's the highest jurisdiction, and that's what. And this philosophical arguments for the jury is what they don't really like to go down. They just want to go by what the legislation says. Or basically keep the status quo in place. And I do wonder if there's an element of fear in these people.
Massive,
who want to keep their jobs and their pay packets if they really start addressing these principles of truth.
I agree entirely, and it's not just immediate threats of their job necessarily, although it could be that. You're right. It's also just the terrifying idea that for most of my life, and because the individual that you're normally talking to is probably quite prominent anyway. That's why they're sticking out on X as being quite prominent, which means that they're probably quite experienced and probably quite well through their career and doing very well. And so what you're hitting is their worldview. You're hitting their entire foundation for their success, their foundation, their belief in the entire system that they were educated in. And as we all know, of course, that is terrifying. You're taking them to the edge of the precipice. They're staring into the abyss, essentially, that all the foundational principles that they thought they had, they actually don't. And it's terrifying.
It's a poison worldview as well.
I was going to say that's why we have to be very careful about how we take them there. We have to do it very carefully because they'll be usually in a place where they just want to close the door on it and they don't want to go there, which is why we have to do it very gently and very carefully, just enough to get them to come to that understanding themselves, to get the penny to drop gradually in the back of their minds that you ultimately can't have natural justice on the one hand, but also have parliamentary sovereignty on the other. They can't go together.
No.
And that's terrifying for them. I interrupted.
So sorry. Is the separation of powers an illusion then?
Well, the separation of powers is a bit of a PR exercise, I think, which it doesn't need to be there, because ultimately, if the government is operating in the way that it should, in the genuine, authentic constitution, where the head of state is taking full responsibility for his government, that is the king. The king is held to account, just like anybody else, for his crimes through trial by jury. but ultimately he's held to account. There's one point of responsibility. And if you have, that means he's responsible for the legislature. He's responsible for executive decisions. He's responsible for justices in appeals, in the appeal system. He's responsible for all of that. He's responsible for the prison system, all of that kind of thing. And they all play off each other. There are implications for all of these things. I remember watching a series of very interesting interviews of one or two of our top judges. Really interesting interviews, and they were actually demonstrating how concerned they were about various aspects. Neuberger was one of them, actually. And I think it was him, and he was talking about his concerns about the prison system. And I can't remember exactly what it was about. But you see, the separation of powers would say, well, hang on a sec, you're a judge. You shouldn't be concerning yourself with the matters of the prison system in the executive branch, right? There's no way that a responsible individual in a public servant shouldn't be concerned about a matter that absolutely has a bearing on his judgments and his interpretation of and his enforcement of laws. It shouldn't be his enforcement anyway, it should be the jury, but you know what I'm saying. And so he was concerned about, genuinely about something to do with the prison system. And the separation of powers, of course, would say that, well, he shouldn't be concerned about that. It should be nothing to do with him. Well, of course it should, right? Because actually a properly functioning government should be acting with joined up thinking. And it can think with joined up thinking if it operates correctly and as a whole, with the responsibility of one individual at the top who's taken his oath, because he's seeing all of it and he can correct all of it. And
but it comes back to the whole distortions of the rule of law as well, doesn't it? Because we keep coming back to this, the whole royal assent thing. Yeah. Shouldn't Charles be stepping in and dissolving Parliament if they're trying to tamper with constitutional law?
Absolutely. But then we've got, of course, the problem that even if he were of a mind to do that, and of course there's lots of debate as to whether he's on board with wanting to fulfill his duties properly and all the rest of it, or is he just in with the crowd that are causing all the problems? I get that, obviously, but the problem, of course, is that most of the country, not understanding the Constitution, wouldn't want him to get involved, wouldn't want him to interfere, and would accuse him of being political when they're not right in that. What he actually should be doing that. So this accusation that's often thrown at the monarch that he shouldn't be getting involved and getting political. No, you're not quite right on that. He shouldn't be party political. In fact, there shouldn't be parties at all anyway, of course, because that's just about bundles of policies and things like that. But absolutely, the king should be political because he's the head of state and he's ultimately taken a promise to do his duty, which is to make sure that what is on the statute book is in alignment with constitutional law and is not breaching the individual rights of the people. And he has a responsibility to do that. But right now, if he did it, guess what would happen? Whole swathes of people, both in mainstream and in the freedom movement, would probably launch at him and say, you shouldn't be getting involved, etc., etc. And this is why we've got a problem with people not being clear as to how it should be working. And if the people largely do not know and do not understand their constitution, this is why you're not going to get unity and you're not going to get good people in the system stepping up in their responsibility. Because you've just got a shambles. You've got false belief systems in the collective everywhere, and the people haven't done their own work in understanding how it's all supposed to work. I'm ranting, but that's effectively the problem there, isn't it? I guess.
Sorry, Calvin, go on.
And the oaths emphasise the responsibility of all those within the administration.
Yes.
But no one seems to acknowledge the importance of the King's oath and the oath of allegiance that all MPs swear. That's what binds it all together. It's a promise to uphold principle.
Precisely it. Yeah. And the king is not being allowed to do it.
Yeah, because I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it now. If the reigning monarch would stepped in and basically refused assent to a piece of legislation, he would be forced to abdicate. As far as that.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what the convention has become? Yeah, but you're right. I mean, he absolutely must have the right to do that. But of course, the sort of mantra that you hear out there, and I've heard that this is the sort of thing that's repeated um, in the training and the education with legal professionals as well, is that the yes, technically, you get all this fudging. Whenever you hear a sentence beginning with
Yeah.
it's bullshit coming up. Here we go, bullshit mode, right? Well, I don't know about that. So what you hear is, yeah, technically, the king has the right to refuse royal assent, but he wouldn't. This is like the kind of stuff that's trotted out.
It's pretend, isn't it?
Bullshit. Sorry, starting to use very bad language. Terrible, terrible language.
So, what would be interesting is to see what would happen if legislation is passed to further curtail trial by jury, and then the king has to give assent. So, what Leveson and Lammy are essentially doing is asking the king to breach his oath.
Yes, correct. Exactly it. Nobody can see it.
I mean, it's the T word, isn't it?
It all
Of
comes
course it
back.
is. Of course it is.
It ultimately, yes, exactly, yeah, it's the T word. It ultimately comes back to, well, what does he say in his oath? And what is your understanding and interpretation of his oath? I promise to govern according to laws and customs. And then we get into this very interesting stuff about, well, that text has been changed anyway, as we know. That's something Damien, we're going to have to deal with in that next section. But about the very interesting coronation oath text that became firmly written into statute in 1688, and it's not government's business to be writing that down in legislative form anyway, because it's not from them. The authority of what's written in the coronation oath doesn't come from government; it comes from above that. But what was interesting, of course, was the inclusion of that new piece of text, which I hadn't realised, of course, actually comes first. The addition comes first, which is, I promise to govern according to statutes in Parliament agreed on, which was never part of the text until 1688. It was just, I promise to govern according to laws and customs. And of course, as we know, laws and customs in that situation refers to the people's laws. It refers to the laws that have not conventions of Parliament, not what's come about through people like Dicey or anyone else for that matter. It's the laws of the people. It's what's common to the people. It's the original common law, legendary. That's what he's promising to govern by, is to govern according to the laws of the people. So there was no reason to mention statutes in there, because all statutes, which is why it was never mentioned before, prior to that, is that all statutes have to be in alignment with the laws and customs anyway. So there's no reason to mention statutes. But with the addition of that for the first time in 1688, it starts to suggest that, well, actually, maybe we want the monarch to govern according to statutes that might not be in alignment with the constitutional law and the laws of the people. Yeah, and that's the whole point. That's the basis of the misunderstanding. It's demonstrating the misunderstanding right there. Yes. And then we've got the added complication, of course, that the last two monarchs actually left that piece out and actually said it correctly and said, I promise to govern according to laws and customs. Now, why was that? And I don't know the answer to that completely. It could be that they're under duress, and actually it's the only way they know how to poke back at what they the duress that they're under, if you like. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one, but that, just to lay that one out, that's where you've got the interesting problem.
I don't think it matters though, to be honest, because nobody's doing anything anyway. So it's just at the moment a piece of it's not even an agreement, is it really? It isn't anything because it doesn't hold any weight because nobody's aligning themselves with morality and what's right.
Yeah,
Well,
they're not being honest. I mean, that's the problem. Either we're lying to ourselves, and this is just window dressing, and why the hell are we having the king promising to have these duties and to fulfill these duties? And why would you promise to do that when you're not being given the powers to do it anyway? Right? And we're all pretending. I mean, is it that he's actually got the power and it's his government, or isn't it? And if it isn't, then let's just stop pretending and lying to the general public about this. So this is the problem: is that it's basically an absolutely massive elephant in the room. It's a whopping lie in the collective that people can't face. That's it. That's all
I
it is.
think that along with the chipping away at the prerogative
Yes.
over a period of time, you're just taking away the king's ability to govern at all in any
Yeah.
way.
So what you've got is a massive shambles. Actually, you've got 350 heads of state now instead in the form of ministers in parliament just doing stuff that and nobody can be held to account anymore. So you have to. People are a little bit worried about hierarchies. When they get a little bit spiritual, they think, well, no, hierarchy is a very kind of like male structure. It's very, no, you need a hierarchy. Yeah, and your governing system must have a hierarchy because you have to have somebody that you can hold to account. It has to be somebody accountable at the top. And it's just like that in business. You've got to hold the CEO to account. You can't, devolve responsibility a little bit to the head of HR or the chief financial officer, or we're just going to obfuscate responsibility here so that the shareholders can't actually hold anybody to account if you've got a failing company, whatever it is. No, you don't do that. Ultimately, you pull the CEO in front of if there's problems, right? It's always, yeah. And if you've got a problem with the state, and there shouldn't really be a state as such, but your governing administration, they're not even really doing governing, are they? If it was done properly, they're just an administration. And if the person who's stepped up in responsibility, in a life position to take responsibility for that, and that's a hell of a responsibility. My God, who would step into that role anyway? But whoever's doing that needs to be given the powers to be able to do it, but also be able to be held to account as well at the same time. And don't obfuscate and gaslight everybody as to how that's supposed to operate. So that's the problem. Calvin, go on. Sorry, you've got to say something there.
And there's no problem with people stepping forward to perform a role of responsibility within the community as long as there's equal justice. And that's what a lot of voluntarists, etc., can't understand. It's simply someone stepping forward to perform a role of responsibility. It's delegated.
Absolutely.
And as long as there's equal justice for all, which is what the Constitution prescribes, then there's no issue.
Correct. Exactly right. Yeah, that's you're right. That's the error that I think is made, as we know, by anarchists and voluntarists, is that they don't quite understand that you are always going to have a public space. Yeah, in a community, you're always going to have people stepping up to do roles, to perform roles that need to be done, whether that's the security guy in the village who's effectively the police guy. He might start doing it voluntarily and he just, that's fine. Fantastic. You need somebody to do these things in, whatever role it is. That's how government started. The seeds of government is simply people stepping up to perform some kind of a public role, which is always going to happen. You can't avoid that. But the way that you deal with it and the way that you make sure that your public space and the public officials don't become a danger to the citizenry as a whole is you damn well make sure that, as you just said, Calvin, that you have public justice, which is the people remaining the judges of all matters of justice themselves. and then you don't have a problem. And then your public servants, your administrators, don't become anything more than that. They don't become a government. They don't really become a state as such. They remain the servants of the people. That's the key, isn't it? I guess.
So essentially, there will always be a government.
Yes.
And that's what I think people find hard to accept. Even if you run a small business, there's a form of governance within that structure.
Always has to be. Yeah.
But it's getting people to understand that within that government, which is just an instrument by which we rule ourselves, there is the jury, which is the supreme authority. The final say is the voice of the community. And as long as that's there, that safeguard, which they're trying to remove, there isn't an issue with, responsibility and hierarchy.
Yeah.
I think they're looking at how government is now.
Yes.
That's the problem. That's how they're picturing how it would be without actually understanding, everything that goes along with it, the justice system, trial by jury and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They're just seeing it as as a state force.
I think you're right, Damien. I think it's the fact that people can't get back to first principles. They don't understand that they keep wanting to see it within the context that we currently now have.
Yeah.
And they're not taking into account the fact that you've got layers of distortion and obfuscation that have been placed on top. Well, you have to pull those back to see how the principles of how it's supposed to operate, how it would manifest. You have to be clear about that because ultimately going forward, if we got a complete destruction of society and everything collapsed, it's the same principle applies. You still need to know how this has to operate, even if you're starting again. I mean, heaven forbid, let's hope that doesn't happen. But, we don't need to go there. We don't need to go to complete destruction. If the people broadly, in sufficient numbers, came to a clear understanding of how it's supposed to operate, because that would then cause things gradually to right itself. You would get self-correcting going on in the system, particularly in view of the fact that was always how it was supposed to operate anyway. It has a legitimate foundation to it already. So this is what I was saying about pushing against an open door. The door's already there. You don't have to, you're just pushing against it. There's no resistance. If you put the system back as to how it was supposed to operate, it's quite clear and quite easy to prove to yourself logically how it was supposed to operate. But people aren't wanting to do that. They don't seem to want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. That's where the psychological maturity needs to be exercised. It's accepting that you've got it wrong and that your worldview has been poisoned. You've been psychologically manipulated through many techniques, which has dissuaded people from actually looking at how the Constitution is supposed to operate and that it is a microcosm of natural law.
Yes.
But as you say, people keep trying to reinvent the wheel. And on that note, like with the so-called freedom movement that claim to want justice, there's the perfect opportunity here. There's mass treason being committed.
Yes.
And so if you really want justice, why aren't you shouting from the rooftops, pointing it out?
I know.
And let's define what treason is, though, for those who think it's something different. Treason is any act adjudged to undermine or be in conflict with the absolute supreme authority ordained by the Constitution of the people.
Yes.
Which is trial by jury, and that's the supreme authority. And the constitutional trial by jury is what the people afford themselves.
Absolutely.
To protect from all species of oppression. It's not granted by a self-ordained authority. It's what the people afford themselves, and that's legendary. That's real common law. The decisions of jurors in a jury delivering a verdict according to conscience. It's simple as that.
Totally right. That is beautifully put. It's that's exactly it. And so treason in that context is a very serious thing, because what it's doing is it's attacking It's attacking the foundation of the mechanism, the principles, the very principles that keep a harmonious society in place. Because what you're doing is you're damaging everybody else in society when you commit treason. And not only that, you are potentially damaging generation after generation as well, which is why it's such a serious crime. So anything that you do as a public servant to undermine the principle of the jury being the government, being the people's own final arbiter of law, anything that you do to damage that is a bloody serious offence. Yes. It's nothing to do with the king, or, you know, I mean, it is by what that flows from that, because obviously if you're you know, later in history, you know, if you're proposing the attacking of a king or whatever it is, then in a sense that you are undermining the constitutional, you know, the whole mechanism, if you like, and that's a danger too. But that's not really what it meant. Really, that's, you know, treason is really the attack on the people's freedoms and the principles that hold all of that together. That's exactly it. Yeah.
It's creating injustice, which is why it's so serious. Because you're creating the conditions to enslave people and punish them arbitrarily. That's why it's so dangerous. Because it puts everyone's freedom in jeopardy.
Yeah.
But people's perception of what the Constitution is, what trial by jury is, what natural law is, what morality is not straightened out.
It's all over the place.
So there's no way of getting to that point until we get to that point ourselves.
Spot on. That's exactly it, which is why I've said it's all about education. There's no way that the general public are going to be able to make good arguments and make claims and hold people to account. You're not going to be able to do it until you get clear on this and have a really good understanding of how the Constitution is supposed to operate. If you don't do any work on it, if you don't do any reading on it, if you don't watch these videos and start really taking this in and understanding it, then you're going to be very ineffective. And funnily enough, most people are, because they don't get it. Yeah, society has to get clear, absolutely clear on morality, natural justice, and the foundations of our constitutional rule of law, and understanding how it has to operate. There's no other way that it can operate without resting on these principles, unless you want a society to be going through a journey of self-sabotage. Yeah, if you want your society to start spiraling downwards, then you can have any kind of constitution you like. You can break all of these fundamental principles if you want to. That's fine. And that is what is happening. Yeah. And the reason why we are not developing a harmonious society, a society that is strong, that has a sense of liberty and freedom within it, is because we're working against these principles that you can't ignore, because they're baked into reality. They're baked into the natural order. Yeah, you're hitting reality. You're working against the way that reality wishes to function. And if you do that in the collective, or even in your individual lives as well, but in the collective as well, and you take on false beliefs, you are running counter to the very way that nature wishes you to operate in your life. I'm seriously ranting here.
No, it's a really good point.
Do some of your ranting, because people get sick of my rants.
No, it's a great point, Will. And a huge principle that encompasses that, as you know, is care.
Yes.
And so I'd like to ask people as well, what do you think happens when a huge amount of people have no care about these principles and frameworks that we're talking about? And then there's a large group of people who do care about removing trial by jury and bringing in tyranny. Who do you think will win?
Yeah.
So care is the attracting force within the universe, because it's a generative principle. It's what we create, that which we care about. It's how we generate our reality, by focusing on what we care about. It's the driving force. So if there is no care, those who have dark care or care for our enslavement,
Yes.
they will win. So again, it's like objective morality and freedom working in the aggregate sense. It starts from a place of care, and when you fully understand what's at stake, and it's all, you understand through that care that we are actually all codependent on the quality of each other's behavior.
Totally.
And this is what and immoral behavior is what we address collectively through a jury.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important, because it keeps everything in check. That's how we establish the equilibrium of natural law. It's how we govern ourselves. And these are obvious reasons as to why they want it gone, because it's self-governance in alignment with natural law.
Totally. Yeah. Yes, the care principle, the generative principle, absolutely. And Passio breaks that down into two things in particular, doesn't he? What are you paying attention to, and what are you spending time on?
Yeah,
I think are the two things, aren't they? Which are just sort of money related there.
Exactly.
Real money, one eye, mon eye, which is what he talks about. Is that's where it all comes from. Is the care? What do you care enough about in the world to put your will behind? Yeah, not what you care about, but sit around about. Just think about. That's not enough, right? Because mentalism, which is the first principle of Hermeticism, is the initial spark of anything that exists in reality. Has got to appear in the mind first, but then you've got to bring it into action through the solar plexus, the action, and that's the expression. That's the communication. It's the doing. And so, if you are not putting your thoughts into action, then you're not really paying attention and spending time on the things that actually are going to counter the things that the dark side, if you like, or what they're doing, which is to destroy these principles of natural justice. Yeah, if you're not doing enough to counter that, then there you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Ultimately, we'll get karmic consequences, is exactly what we're receiving now, because we're not doing.
Yeah, and that's what people need to understand, is that the presence of evil is telling us that we're out of alignment and that we need to do something about it. It's supposed to be a lesson.
Absolutely right.
So therefore, you need true care. You need free will to correct the free will decisions that were wrong in the first place.
Completely.
So
yeah,
it should be a signpost. All this nonsense should be a signpost saying, right, you're going in that direction, that's wrong.
Yeah.
You need to change course. Get on with it.
And you're absolutely right. It's very interesting because we just can't quite believe sometimes some of the situations that seem to come to the surface. It almost feels like the situations are being manufactured. And you could say at one level, maybe there are people behind the scenes at the human level that are manufacturing bad situations to get us to realize and wake up. Maybe, that's why I called that video, "Is David Lammy a white hat?" And by the way, most of the people that wrote in on the comments had no clue why I called it that at all. Absolutely missed it entirely. Yeah, and it's quite true. You could have those situations. Is David Lammy playing a role? Is he actually saying, "Well, hang on, let's bring this issue to the surface, such that people will start to see, and we'll get debate going, and we'll bring this to the surface so that everybody can see the problems, so that they actually do something about it at the human level, maybe." Or is it actually at a much more esoteric level? Is it at much more at a hidden spiritual level, that there are forces at work to bring lessons to us, to keep learning. We're not learning them, so they just keep coming back at us, and that's the way that the forces of the universe operate. That you're going to keep coming up against problems all the time of the same variety and the same type because you're not learning the lessons. And yeah, you guys are absolutely right. That seems to be what is going on at some level. But I can't believe sometimes how in your face some of these situations are. It's almost like somebody's written a script in order to bring these things up to your face. Look at that.
Yeah,
Can you see the problem?
Are you going to learn? Here it is again.
Yeah.
I think it's some sort of mass hypnosis.
Yeah.
That people just don't pay attention to this kind of stuff because ultimately, at the moment, we're just happy to leave the lies in place.
Absolutely right.
And
that's exactly it, Damien, isn't it? It's leaving lies in place, remaining silent over things. You know, there was one going back to the X activity. I think Calvin, you were getting stuck in on this one as well. But I was seeing criticism of Carl Turner, the MP on the Labour side, who is being a bit more principled about the trial by jury thing, right? And he still doesn't completely get it, and that's fine. We can deal with that. But what was interesting is that he was very much going against the party whip, the party message, if you like. And what was coming up, interestingly, was a few people on X, Labour supporters, basically saying to him, "Oi, shut up! What the hell do you think you're doing? Saying all of this stuff, you're damaging the party. You're." And it was just unbelievable. And so one or two of us were pointing out, so, okay, to these people. So you want him to brush things under the carpet and not say truth, just so that you can prop up your political bullshit? Is that what you're wanting? And usually they went very quiet at that point. Absolute silence. I didn't get anybody coming back. But what I did get is quite a lot of support. Other people pinging in saying, fantastic. Yes, this is what needs to be said. And the message from that is that you need to stop getting into your bloody camps, your ridiculous political camps, and start speaking truth and start exposing things that need to be said. Don't just brush things under the carpet and remain silent over stuff. And I said to somebody, I said, are you a coward or an order follower or both? What is it?
Yeah.
And they shut up straight away. My God. And people came in and said, beautiful, love it. People want to hear truth.
Yes, they do, because it resonates. And but what you just said is, to me, that's like prima facie evidence that there's people that are prepared to disregard the Constitution, principles of natural justice in favour of a party.
Yes, there's the evidence that your bloody political checks and balances don't work. That was the whole point that we were saying to one of the barristers, is that your checks and balances are quite self-evidently not working because you've got the whip in place. You've got people saying, we don't want to raise the truth and bring it to the surface because we want to toe the party line. You bloody idiots. Honestly.
And it's even a lie calling them checks and balances. That's an obfuscation in of itself. That's what pisses me off.
Yeah. It's more lying all the time, just not being honest. Yeah, usually because you're just being spineless.
I think it was that lawyer Chris who put up a petition of some sort and about trial by jury. I basically said to him, look, mate, if we have to petition for our ancient common law right of trial by jury, which is a principle in alignment with truth, then we don't have any fucking rights.
Yeah. Yes.
We're in a tyranny right now.
You're begging the government to give you back the rights that they never had the right to take you away from them in the first place. Do you not see this?
What they should be saying is that you haven't got any authority to do that, full stop. That's the end of it. Where is your authority to start tampering with constitutional law?
Yeah.
You can't. You've got no right at all.
That's what we were saying to Joanna, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. They're not getting it. They just don't see it at all. But they sort of do, I think, because they kind of shut up and remain silent. But there was one comment that really triggered Joanna, which, as I said earlier, I apologized for. I didn't really need to apologize actually, but I wanted to keep it cordial. I said I didn't mean to cause offense, and thank you for what you're doing, by the way. But the point still stands.
Mm.
You're not getting this bit, and
Because
yeah,
we've got to start getting back to the foundational issues and stop focusing on symptoms.
yeah,
I'm
Yes.
fed up of people talking about symptoms of the problem
yeah,
rather than the foundational problem that will take care of all the symptoms.
exactly. And the reason why they can't go to that next stage, though, of course, is they're saying, well, trial by jury is a cornerstone, it's a principle, it's a constitutional principle. What they don't like to go to is reflect on the fact that, okay, so what have you done for the last 150 years then? You've already started it, right? You've already denied the principle of trial by jury for some offences. So you've already got in place the wrong notion that the government can limit and decide how much of that you have. So unless you unpick that completely and go back to all cases, trial by jury as a principle, and interestingly, I'm getting quite a lot of likes and support on that.
So in that sense, then it is, if these issues and principles all do come to the surface, it's the case of essentially one big societal healing process,
yes,
peeling back all these layers, which is why it is powerful in and of itself, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah, and it's why it's frustrating at the moment because we've got a few people doing this and pointing this out in different ways, whether it's Damien, you and I doing videos on the 17th century history or Calvin jumping in, but it's not very many of us. This is the problem, right? And for the last 2 or 3 years, we could have had potentially, well, certainly tens and then hundreds on it. Even, if people are not happy about doing it, a little bit uncomfortable, even if we'd had a group of about 10, 20 people really getting busy on this, my God, we could have made some progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Even
And
with
on
the
that,
relatively small number of voices that we have doing this, it's
that's
causing
what
a kerfuffle, actually, definitely. But my
that's
God,
what I
if we had
really
100 on it, can you imagine by now if we'd been getting off our asses and educating ourselves in the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years? Can you imagine what we could have been doing? But
and that's why
people
I
haven't
get
done the
really
work.
angry. I get really angry when I think about a lot of the people that I used to associate with, and people even currently now within the freedom movement, just still talking about waffle and bollocks. And I'd like to ask people in the freedom movement to ask these 2 questions to everyone, and I bet they don't know the answer. The first question is, what is the dynamic that governs the condition of human freedom? And I bet virtually anyone knows.
Yeah.
And the second question is, what is the physical framework that community uses in which it aligns with natural law by which to govern itself equitably? And I bet they don't know that either.
I won't be able to throw that
And
on.
that's a problem, because if you don't understand the answer to the first question, you don't understand how reality actually works.
Yes.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And secondly, and if you don't know the answer to the second one, then you don't know how justice is supposed to operate, and yet you claim to want that, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
We're just getting back to the whole perception thing, not being aligned with
Yeah,
truth.
certainly.
Yeah.
People's perception is just completely distorted
Yeah.
of what it all means in the first place to apply anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worrying because you've got a lack of perception on all sides, but it's slightly different on different sides. So those sort of trained professionals within the mainstream world have got a problem with perception in a different kind of way. And then those that sort of freedom lovers, the more dissident communities are absolutely infiltrated anyway and are completely lobotomized, and utterly distracted. I would argue. I'm still getting emails to my old email address, which demonstrates that they're not even following my material currently. So they don't even know which email address to send stuff to, which is an indication in a way that they're not really following my stuff at the moment. But I'm still getting stuff from like topics that we were trying to put to bed like 2 or 3 years ago. That's it. I'm still getting it, and they're not moving on at all. Not a clue.
It's like Damien said, perception distortion is the name of the game. That is essentially how they win.
Yeah.
By altering perception, you manipulate behavior, and therefore an inverted reality is formed.
Yes.
And this is how dark occultists, who are really master psychologists, which is how they're able to distort perception. So if you don't initiate yourself into the esoteric knowledge of natural law, the minor or lesser arcana, which is the human psyche,
yes.
If you don't understand how the human mind works, your own mind, and how perception can be distorted, then you're just going to have a total number done on you constantly. When that's what's happening to humanity, it's having a total number done on it through perception distortion.
Yeah.
And obviously the major arcana is universal moral law and the physical sciences.
Yes.
And they have
how they interact.
Yes.
Completely.
The two hemispheres. And if you don't have an understanding of that, then you don't know how the reality you're living in works.
Yeah.
And so you will never get off the starting block.
Yeah.
That's why they're winning, because people don't have this knowledge.
Yeah, they haven't done the groundwork, I'm afraid.
You've got the left and right brain imbalance as well, haven't
That's
you?
exactly what it is.
We're in slave think, aren't we, at the moment? A lot of us.
Yeah.
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 That's what the politics is based off, isn't it? It's the left-right imbalance. You push them one way, then you push them the other, fighting off the imbalance in the mind. That's what the whole politics model is based on. It's basically psychology.
Yes.
Again, that's the minor or lesser arcana of natural law. You need to know this shit.
Yeah. Totally right. Yeah, you need to get clear on it and understand how you're manipulated. And actually, if people just people are obsessed with conspiracy, endless, turning up conspiracy, which some of it is turns out to be true, some of it probably doesn't necessarily, because they're overclaims when you really get into it. But ultimately, it's you just got to stop being stuck there. You have to get through that, because ultimately, the reason why humanity is not making progress is because it's not addressing its own tendency to be manipulated. You have to get stronger. You got to deal with that, really, because anyone who is controlling has a controlling mindset. They're just not going to have a hope in hell's chance if the broad mass of people get themselves over these psychological impediments of being distracted, of lying to yourself about things, having compartmentalized mindsets. If you can start to spot how it is that that's happening within you, and we all do it, we all have it, but at least when you begin to notice that those psychological issues that everybody has, it's like they're inbuilt impediments within humanity that we are challenged to overcome in our evolution. That's really what it is. It's about transforming ourselves. That's where the sort of spiritual alchemy needs to come into play, is where you start to self-reflect and self-analyze such that your thinking is straightened out and there's a kind of internal honesty. And we could get into this on another occasion in more detail if perhaps we should, but it's unless you start to deal with that, you are going to be easily manipulated. And people are. You can see it.
It's having a psychological... Sorry.
Go on, Calvin, don't worry.
And it's having, and this goes for the freedom movement and the legal profession, it's having the psychological maturity to use the trivium process to assess all the facts and admit that there is a possibility that you may have been deceived, that you may have been wrong. And this is really important. And I know I get on my high horse about the freedom movement. That's because I was once in it, talking a load of nonsense myself. And I was very wrong. And I was very publicly open about it, because I was involved with certain groups and doing certain processes, trying to reinvent the wheel, like oh, we need a new system, this, that, and the other. And I thought I knew natural law, and I knew bugger all until I really,
Deep
and I
subject.
was quite embarrassed. Honestly, I was quite embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, I've been shit talking for a long time. And now I see everyone else doing it and I despair. And I'm like, and then when I become initiated in natural law, it just sorted itself out
Yeah.
just through knowledge.
Yeah.
And it was a healing process.
Yes.
And then you come onto the microcosm of natural law, which is the Constitution. Is that okay? So how do we govern ourselves in alignment with natural law?
Yeah.
Yes, we understand the moral framework, which objective morality. So that's not doing murder, rape, theft, assault, trespass, coercion, and fraud. Yeah, that's what we should not be doing. But how do we actually govern ourselves equitably?
Yes.
And so it all ties in, but it takes the principle of care to be able to want to look at it. You have to care about the human condition to want to be able to change its trajectory from slavery to freedom.
Yes. Totally. Absolutely.
Rant over.
Yeah, good one.
It comes back to the whole, if you say you want a condition for society, for everyone, then, you need to get up off your ass and do something about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, as you often say, Calvin, it's about the conditions for change. That if you want change to occur, then real changes have to. There are specific requirements for that condition to change,
Yes.
and not changing how much you want things to change, or you think you do. Because the other problem, of course, lies in the fact that of people's perception of liberty or freedom. I don't think people really understand what liberty and freedom actually is, and do they really want it? If they don't even know what it is, they don't really know what freedom is. And I don't think they do. I think a lot of people don't really want that freedom, because actually wanting true freedom is one would be quite in awe of that, really. Freedom's not an easy condition necessarily to be in. It's a wonderfully uplifting condition. But it's not an easy one, particularly for a lazy society, because you're going to have to get rid of all those attachments and all those dependencies, and all those the provisions, if you like, where things are laid on for you and provided for you. You're going to have to dismantle that. That can't be there. If you want true freedom and liberty, you can't have that kind of stuff, because all of those things come about through in some form, the coercion of making everybody do things a certain way. You've got to have some kind of arrangement in society that we all have to do things a certain way in order for those big systems of provision to be in place. And you can't have it. You can't have it. If you want true liberty, you can't have any of that stuff. You're stripping back your society back to a place where all government is doing is not providing services. It really actually has one purpose, really, which is to uphold a justice mechanism or system for the people in which to be the judges. That's it.
I think you've got a percentage of the population that are happy to be statist. They're comfortable in that position. They want people to do all them things for them. They don't want to take the responsibility themselves, and that in itself is going to be an issue.
Yeah, so what they're really wanting is comfort, not freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry, Damien.
No, go on, mate. You're all right.
Yeah, that's where the psychological manipulation comes in, because they invite people to be lazy.
Yes.
And convenience is a very big psychological tool that's used, because it creates a stand down effect. You go, oh, I'm really comfortable on my sofa. I've got clean water and Netflix. I'll just keep my mouth shut. It's so they've created a comfortable prison that deters dissent. But obviously coercion, which is the main weapon of statism, is the big tool, because if you don't do as you're told, you're arbitrarily punished. And so you have to care. That the only way around that is to have a firm understanding of what morality is, because if you did, you wouldn't allow these immoral institutions to take hold of society. But if you don't care about that, then you are, I'm sorry, an immoral person.
Yeah.
Because you don't care about the human condition and other people suffering.
You're
And
bringing about suffering and immorality through your inaction and your inattention. That's
precisely.
that's the point. Exactly.
Yeah.
Many of us know that, it's kind of kindergarten stuff, that we shouldn't go out and kill people. We shouldn't go out and steal stuff. We shouldn't, that is not really the difficulty in understanding morality and natural law. The difficulty lies in the things that you don't pay attention to, in the things you let slip, the things you remain silent over. That's where the tricky stuff starts to arise. And it's in the normalization of things where we start to make certain behaviors or beliefs normal. When in fact, if you unpack it and look at it more closely, what you're actually doing is green lighting something that is an immorality. Yeah, that's the problem. That's what we have to reflect on, and that's where the natural law comes in. That's the more sophisticated, I suppose, understanding of natural law, is in the inattention, the things we don't want to pay attention to and therefore allow to occur through normalization and other things. That's the tricky bit, and people don't want to go there. It's terrifying. So
we should want the condition of freedom for everybody, not just for ourselves. No matter what our current situation is, whether we're comfortable or not, we should want that for everybody else.
Totally.
No, we shouldn't be keeping quiet because life's being good to a few individuals.
Yeah.
That are benefiting from this situation. It just comes back to a morality thing. That's the foundation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the law of one. That was a great point, that Damien. That's it's the law of one. So that is, if we allow for the conditions for just one of us to suffer, consequentially, we allow for the potential for us all to suffer.
Yes, it's really powerful.
So it's like being on a playground and a bully to bully someone. If you allow for that, he's going to work his way over to you eventually.
Yes.
That's like a natural consequence of not calling out injustice and putting a stop to it.
Yeah.
So we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. That's the principle of natural rights. You put it beautifully, both of you there. That's I forget about the law of one, actually. That's a really powerful way of putting it. It's the reciprocal arrangement. It's the we do put it, I suppose, slightly differently. My rights end where another's begin. The principle that I can't expect to have other people not trampling on my choices and freedoms if I also don't do it for others too. And I want to do that for others too, because I also have an inbuilt compassion and an understanding that I don't want to see my neighbor suffering from someone else doing it to them. Right. So this is the whole reciprocal arrangement, and it's all to do with the individual rights and the expression of free will and equity. The free will is the feminine aspect, that impulse, which is the desire to be self-determining, to make choices in life, to come to understand that through our own choices, we learn to become responsible and trustworthy to others. And then the other side of that is the equity, that we also learn to be responsible and trustworthy by not trampling on the choices of others as well, and allowing them to be able to do that too. And that's all about the golden rule. Yeah, and that's the principle of natural law, that essentially the whole idea of rights and wrongs and morality and justice flows from that understanding, that reciprocal arrangement of the golden rule. That's natural justice. Yeah, if you build your justice system or the framework of your governing system of your nation on something other than that, you're going to get it badly wrong. But if it's based on those natural principles that we live in an equitable system, meaning that we're all equal under the law. Yeah, we're all And that means that our right to be self-determining and make choices is the same as somebody else's rights to be able to make their own choices too. And the understanding that of the in-between, the fact that we mustn't do it such that it prevents somebody else making those choices, that's the equity, that's the natural boundary on how far we can go with our free will. And it naturally exists. It just exists within reality. And the fact that it just exists within nature and it functions like that in reality is where natural justice comes from. That's the rooting in the principles of natural justice that many people do not understand. Another rant, sorry. Good teaching opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's why the jury is so powerful, because they bring their individual conscience, which is the knowledge. Even if they don't have the philosophical knowledge of all that, that is still inherent.
It's built in anyway. Yeah,
it's built in. It's the heart energy, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's why it's so powerful, because it's the universal conscience of mankind coming together in a group of 12 to apply logic, reason, discernment, and nuance. And that's how the universe wants us to function. That's how we sort stuff out, through dialogue and through coming together.
Yeah.
Not through writing out arbitrary legislation saying, no, it says that, so this is happening. That's tyranny.
Yes.
Because you're removing all those principles that I just named.
And what it's doing, Calvin, as well, is if you creating a piece of legislation, as opposed to thrashing things out in a jury, is like putting a cover over the darkness or the problems. Yeah, so one of the wonderful things that happens on a jury, and this is why it's important for people who jump in often say, well, I think juries are a problem because, we've got a drop in consciousness. People aren't moral. But the whole point about a jury and the deliberation process on a jury is that each individual has their prejudices and their biases held to account, if you like, by the other 11. Okay, and that's the magic. That's the alchemy in the jury, is that jurors go through a sort of a maybe temporary, but maybe even permanent to some extent, consciousness raising process, because it forces you to self-reflect, and to challenge your prejudices and your biases. Whereas a piece of legislation where you just order follow is like a cover in society, because it suppresses that opportunity for people to have that healing and that consciousness raising exercise that we talk about on the jury in deliberation. So beautifully put. That's exactly it. That's the alchemical process and the value of and precisely why it is that a healthy society must have jury deliberation at its heart in order to not only deal with justice and make justice work, but also as a kind of healing exercise, an ongoing healing exercise, and a consciousness raising exercise within society. That's people taking part in the delivery of justice, but also that understanding and healing that's going on.
Yes, powerful, very powerful. And the opposite to a jury, I would say, is order following, which is the suppression of consciousness or the abdication of your conscience, which you have no right to do, because that means you're not discerning right from wrong. You're just blindly obeying. And the jury omits all of that.
I think what you've just said, Will, is a good point, in the sense that I think that's a bit of a cop-out when people say, oh yeah, but people, I think generally people are moral. And I think the fact with a jury is that anybody who is flexing immoral principles is going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Completely. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Go and watch 12 Angry Men and watch that happen.
Do you know what? I watched it.
12 times over, you see it happen. Yeah.
What a brilliant film. Brilliant.
I haven't seen that yet.
And in fact both, because they made a remake of it, didn't they? Well,
Yeah,
more
they did.
recently
Yeah, you're
in the
right. Yeah.
1990s, which is also very good. We watched that one. I hadn't seen that one until recently. So the old black and white one is fantastic, absolutely legendary film, and if you haven't seen it, do it. To the viewers, but also the newer one is great too. And the other thing actually that I always say, and I said it on my courses, which I'm not running now at the moment, but probably need to get back into those, is the documentary, the 1986 PBS Frontline documentary that's in the resources section of commonlawconstitution.org. Go into the resources section, and I think it's in the learning section, but have a look anyway. But it's a documentary called Inside the Jury Room. And you wouldn't have been able to do it in this country, but in America, they were able to make a program where they actually, in a real case, went into the jury room and filmed their deliberations. And it's absolutely amazing to watch. And I would recommend anyone go and watch that. Not least also because it was a case of jury independence within that. The jury making an independent decision. A case of annulment, actually, as well, actually happening right before you. And an amazing, extraordinary situation where the judge refused to tell the jury that they are allowed to, even if it means going against the legislation, they are allowed to judge independently of the legislation. It's down to the defense lawyer to tell them, which again wouldn't happen in this country. And they do indeed do that. They exercise their independence in that situation. And the biggest twist at the end is when the judge stands up at the end and congratulates the jury for doing it. I refuse to tell you about this awkward anomaly that we don't like to bring to the surface about judging independently of the legislation. I'm not going to tell you that because it's just awkward and we don't want to go there and all the rest of it. And then at the end, he actually congratulates the jury for doing it. I mean, how bizarre the situation
Yeah.
we're in.
Imagine being in a court of law and then some like a judge speaking like that. I mean, essentially, it's saying, well, we could deliver natural justice, but we're just going to conceal that.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're gonna
it's
lie
supposed
to
to be
you.
about justice.
We're a justice system, and we're going to lie to the general public
Yeah,
through a mission at best. But sometimes, actually, it's a bit more than that. You know, I know it's astounding. We probably should wind it up, but I mean, we could go on for ages, and let's do it again. We'll just keep going, and but hope the viewers who do care about these matters are enjoying this kind of content and material. So you know, well done to you guys for paying attention, because this is some of the most important stuff that we're dealing with here, for our community, our society, our future evolution, our development. We're touching on some very deep and profound subjects here that I think we all know are absolutely vital and critical. So any final thoughts from you guys before we sort of maybe should wind it up?
No, just obviously look out for the next installment of 17th century history, which we haven't done yet, but we should at some
yeah, I
point.
look forward to that.
And obviously this article that I've wrote,
Yeah.
which I should really put out.
Yes, it's great. Yeah, it's very powerful and a bit of a bombshell, actually, to be honest. And for the viewers, it's basically more information on well, you said it at the beginning,
Yeah.
about the Convention Parliament that was the basis for the Bill of Rights. The more we look into it, I mean, my God, you know, the whole Glorious Revolution and the Bill of Rights is an absolutely disgraceful period. And anyone propping up the notion or the idea that the Bill of Rights is a legitimate extension to our Constitution, I'm sorry, but you really need to do some work urgently,
Yeah.
because the more you go in that direction, the more difficult you're going to find it turning around and coming back again. You're going to make a bit of a plonker of yourself if you're not careful. I'm sorry, I'm just saying it. The more you go into it, the more you realise there's no bloody way that what went on at the Glorious Revolution and the Bill of Rights and the Coronation Oath Act that came before it and all of that chapter is in any way legitimate, or propping up any kind of legitimate governance or constitutionality. Absolutely no way. And the more people, and for you viewers, please call it out as well. If you've been watching the series and reading the stuff that I've been putting out, there's a quick, fairly short thing I put out on Substack called Bill of Rights or Bill of Wrongs, which just encapsulates it in quite a short way. But Damien's piece of writing will come out fairly soon. That'll be another one as well. But, familiarize yourself with these arguments, which is, the Bill of Rights put, it illegally confirmed limitations on jury membership. It absolutely weakened trial by jury. Most people don't know that. Yeah. If you want a really good essay, look up, go to democracydefined.org and download Ken Dewdney's essay, The Tragedy and Treason of the 1689 Bill of Rights. Download it and read it. And then you'll get a really damn good grounding on what the problems are with that piece of legislation. But if you're propping up that, then you've misunderstood the constitutional law and how it's supposed to operate. Definitely. Another rant, but there we go. Calvin, any final thoughts from you? Sorry about that.
I would say to anyone listening, if you're new to natural law, then please watch and study. Don't just watch, study Mark Passio's 2013 natural law seminar called The Law of Attraction and How to Apply It in Your Life.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
for the Constitution, for information on the Constitution and get your head around natural justice, I would please read Lysander Spooner's 1853 essay, an essay on the trial by jury, and that's on Will's website, commonlawconstitution.org.
Yeah, you can find that all over the place, actually, but for convenience, you're right, it's in the resources section.
Yeah. Actually, the book we bought, that's a really good one because it's got the notes with it.
Yes.
I normally have it handy, but it's not here.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
Lastly, if you're in the freedom movement and you know that you're just challenging illegitimacy constantly, drowning in bureaucracy, banging your head against a wall, everyone's saying different things, you're confused, you're frustrated, then as I needed a kick up the arse. You probably need a kick up the arse too. So I would recommend, for a kick up the arse, to read my article on Substack called The Absolute Disgrace of the So-Called Freedom Movement.
Oh, yes.
The silence is deafening. Just read that and change course, because as Will said earlier, there are specific requirements of humanity if we are to achieve the things that we say we want, and we need to align with natural law, essentially.
Definitely. Yeah. Good. All right, gentlemen, fantastic. If we go on any longer, the aging laptop will struggle with the video size. So we'll leave it at that. And thanks again, guys. Fantastic. And we'll do it again shortly, I'm sure. And thanks to the viewers. Take it easy, guys. All the viewers, and I hope 2026 is positive for you as well. And see you in the next one. Cheers for now.